Welcome to episode 3 of Boxing Philosophy. In this episode, we'll start by talking about Canelo versus Terence Crawford and look at a few different potential outcomes. We'll then ask the question, is Deontay Wilder finished, and what a fight with Francis Ngannou might look like? Next, we'll move to the super middleweight division to discuss the Chris Eubank Jr. versus Connor rematch. And then we will look at Callum Smith's European win. After that, we'll address Japan's biggest star, Naoya Inoue, who many say is sensational and maybe pound for pound the best. And to finish, we'll ask the question, is Holly Holm the greatest female boxer of all time? So with that being said, let's begin. So how Canelo can destroy Bud Crawford. Now, Canelo is a tremendous fighter, and Crawford is a tremendous fighter. But right now, I'm going to give a scenario where Canelo comes out victorious. Now, the fight's momentum is developing, and Canelo is a machine. I think there's various instances where Canelo has shown that he has ferocious punching. One of the first references that comes to mind is the fight with Triple G. Let's paint the context. When he fought Triple G was feared, very much feared. And they had a disputed draw in the first fight, which was a great fight. But in the second fight, Canelo made a transition. He stayed in the center of the ring, predominantly stayed in the center of the ring, and he commanded respect, and he punched ferociously, and he punched so hard that he got Triple G's respect, and effectively and respectively, Golovkin gave ground. And I think that was a significant turning point. That was a significant turning point in Canelo's career. And up to this point, he had many great victories, but this showed an evolution. And I think this part of Canelo's career where he's really developed into a real strong puncher. Let's give another reference point. There's a few here. We've got the Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, and Amir Khan. Now, in the Amir Khan fight, there's some interesting things to state here. Number one, Amir Khan was using movement. He was, if my recollection serves me correctly, he was winning the fight. But Canelo was patient, calm, composed. He found his moment in round 6, I believe, with an overhand right, and the fight was over. It was a meticulously well-timed power shot, and it's another reference point. That Canelo is a ferocious puncher, and he will need to be a ferocious puncher, I believe, to win against Bud Crawford, who is a great fighter, truly great fighter. Then we have the Caleb Plant, and Caleb Plant is a good contender, very good contender. He came into the fight with Canelo with a lot of confidence. He brought a lot to the table. Those fast, blistering combinations, that left hook, he doubles it, triples it. He has very good movement. Yes, he may not be the most powerful, even though he's developing his power recently, but he has very good movement. He shortens up his punches. He's very fast, great reflexes. And again, Canelo, it was a competitive fight, but he overcame the challenges and he asserted control with that power punching. And then the next reference point is Billy Joe Saunders. Billy Joe Saunders is a southpaw that's very tricky. He's hard to hit. He's hard to catch. British fighter, world champion level. And he brought a formidable threat because he's quick. He hits you. He feints. He moves. He's not a ferocious puncher, but he's evasive. It's the old adage of boxing, hit and not be hit. And from what I remember, Billy Joe Saunders started off really well, but again, it was the power and precision. It was the power and precision of Canelo that came through. And he was a real malicious puncher in that fight. I believe in that fight, Billy Joe Saunders had some eye issues due to the formidable punching power. And I think this formidable punching power with accuracy, because those both things have to come together, that's the thing that could cause Crawford some tremendous problems. Here's another premise. So the first premise for Canelo winning the fight spectacularly is that this ferocious punching power with accuracy is going to take effect. And we've had 4 reference points of that. The second premise is that some people are saying that Canelo's getting old in boxing terms and that this is showing in his recent performances. But here's another perspective. Maybe Canelo's not getting old in boxing terms. Maybe he's deeply unmotivated. Maybe it's the lack of motivation that's triggered what some would define as lackluster performances. And if that's the case, then that means that Canelo still has a lot in the tank and is going to deliver something phenomenal. Another thing I think is important, that Canelo has had 2 losses. If my memory serves me correctly, he's had 2 losses. He's had the loss to Floyd Mayweather, which was a long time ago, and he was a different type of fighter, and he had the loss to Bivol. I think it's important that, from what I can remember in the Mayweather fight, and my memory might serve me incorrectly because human memory is notoriously not good, generally speaking, but from what I can remember is that Mayweather hit him with counter punches and controlled the tempo of the fight. Canelo was in the middle of the ring, but Floyd Mayweather controlled him with clever counter punches. And in a sense, even though Canelo maintained his composure, he never rolled the dice. He never rolled the dice and went for it. And additionally, in the Bivol fight, I guess you could make the same argument. He maintained his composure in the Bivol fight, but he never completely rolled the dice. Of course, it's how you define rolling the dice, because he threw very hard punches at Bivol. And he was really trying to hurt Bivol. But there came a point, I think in the later rounds, that maybe Canelo would need to do more. And again, he didn't roll that dice. So one of the learning points from those 2 losses, and these 2 are great fighters. And again, there's if you want to lose to anyone, it would be Bivol and Mayweather. But one of the reference points could be that if the fight is competitive, is Canelo able to take it to the next level? Is he able to transcend and up the work rate? Or is he able to, really go through the phases? And that's something that I think he should work on, because there could be a scenario where in a competitive fight, Bud Crawford may be ahead on points and he would need to make some adjustments, not just in the power, but in the output. But if they're looking at this and they're studying the tapes, then perhaps Canelo can do this. Here's another thing that I think could be very significant in this fight. Can Bud Crawford handle the power, but can he handle the left hook to the body with the added weight? Can he handle the left hook to the body with the added weight? Typically, Canelo, when he sets up the shot, he throws the right uppercut and then he throws the left hook to the body. So he throws the right uppercut to the head and the left hook to the body. Obviously, Crawford's team will know this. But the point is he just doesn't come through the front door. He doesn't come through the front door with the left hook to the body. He sets it up, he waits, and he can throw it on the counter. And if he's able to be consistently landing that left hook to the body, that's a potential knockout punch. And that punch could be significant. That punch could be the difference. And also, I think there's another premise that could set up a phenomenal victory for Canelo. And that is the premise that Canelo comes in with no injuries. He has had some injuries historically, as many professional athletes and professional boxers do. But if he comes in with no injuries, the previous, what some would consider lackluster performances, is due to lack of motivation. and that left hook to the body is on point. And, you know, Bud Crawford could be in some serious, serious trouble. How Bud Crawford destroys Canelo. So now we're playing devil's advocate. Now, Canelo Alvarez is one of the greatest of his era. But Terence Crawford is an elite fighter. He's an elite fighter. His speed, timing, and ability to switch styles, it may neutralize Canelo's strengths. So while Canelo relies on pressure and power, Crawford thrives on breaking opponents down with precision. So this is why many believe Canelo simply won't be able to handle Terence Crawford. So here is the case. This is the case for Bud Crawford, Terence Crawford, to win the fight. So we've got a few references. And there's 3 references here: Kell Brook, Errol Spence, and Sean Porter. So let's go to Kell Brook. Now, Kell Brook, I think, was a very underestimated fighter. He was a very accurate puncher. He had so much potential, and he was a world champion. And the main thing about Kell Brook was he had a great jab, a great straight right, and he had really amazing timing. Now, admittedly, when he fought Crawford, he didn't have his original outfit, which would have been his trainer, Dominic Ingle. But he still was a formidable force. And despite this, despite being a formidable force, Crawford was able to win in 4 rounds. And that just shows how phenomenal Crawford is, because the fight started off, Kell Brook started off well, and then Crawford just made immediate adjustments. And then let's go to the Sean Porter fight. And Sean Porter I really like Sean Porter as a fighter. He just brings it every single time. He brings it. He's ferocious. He's a small target, and he's just throwing multiple punches. And he's just such a competitor. There's so much passion that he brings. And to be honest with you, he was very competitive with Crawford. But then in the later rounds, I can't remember, it was round 9 or round 10, Crawford made the relevant adjustments and then scored. I don't think it was a knockout, it was a stoppage. And these again are great fighters. These are fighters of high caliber that Crawford is able to adapt. He's able to solve the puzzle. Similar to Usyk. The great thing about Usyk is he's able to solve the puzzle. He solved the Anthony Joshua puzzle twice, the Tyson Fury puzzle twice, the Daniel Dubois puzzle twice. You bring him something new, he's able to analyze it, take in the data, and then make the appropriate amendments. And Bud Crawford, Terence Crawford, is the same. And then you've got the Errol Spence fight. And he was, to say that he was brilliant in the Errol Spence fight, I don't think that even really captures it. He was monumentally brilliant in that fight. Spence was a force to be reckoned with. He had victories over Kell Brook. He had victories over Sean Porter. And he was seen as that guy. He was southpaw, really strong body attack, precision puncher, throws many punches, considered an elite fighter. And Crawford went in there and just did the job. It was a dominant performance. I believe there was an uppercut. I can't remember if it was a left uppercut and a right uppercut, but he caught Spence with an uppercut, and I think Spence was trying to throw an overhand right. The precision of that punch was absolutely extraordinary. And I think this is one thing that's significant about Crawford, is his accuracy. I guess in boxing there's levels. There's the British level, European level, world title contender, champion, elite champion, etc. Or you could say in accuracy there's 1 to 100. In that fight, he went beyond 100 with regards to the accuracy. That was a perfectly timed shot. And Bud Crawford seems to do this time and time again. And when he's on and he has that type of accuracy, I don't know if anyone can live with him. Here's another premise, and that would indicate that Terence Crawford is going to have an amazing victory. I think there's an argument here that Terence Crawford will struggle to put in an elite performance with the weight gain. But imagine if he's able to excel with the weight gain, or at least maintain the level of boxing perfection. If the weight gain does not affect his performance, then who can live with the skill set of Terence Crawford? And if the weight gain doesn't affect his performance and improves his punch resistance, then that will be an incredible combination. Because one of the questions that I think is an important question, it's a very important question, is that can Crawford take Canelo's punches? Can Crawford take Canelo's punches? Can he handle that left hook to the body, which is set up with the right uppercut to the head? And also, sometimes Canelo will throw the jab to the body and then throw that overhand right, or the right hook. And he generates so much power into that punch, and it's so fast that can he absorb those type of ferocious attacks? Yes, you can criticize Canelo Alvarez's output, and the reason why his output is relatively low is because he's putting so much into those punches. But those punches are fast, compact, they're delivered with absolute power, but the trajectory of the punch is very short. It's boom, boom. He's not throwing it to the body, the jab to the body, and then dipping. He's throwing it and then throwing it straight off. It's hard to read. Can Crawford take those punches? Will those punches have an effect on him? If the added weight will increase his ability to take those punches, and if he can take those punches, then surely Canelo Alvarez is in trouble. Here's another reference. Canelo has losses to Floyd Mayweather, amazing fighter, and to Bivol, amazing fighter. But you could argue that the repeating pattern is that when he's losing a fight, he keeps his composure. That's a good thing, but he doesn't roll the dice. And if Crawford is able to control the distance and is able to control the fight, then if Canelo doesn't roll the dice, then surely Crawford may be able to outpoint Canelo. Here's another problem that could enable Crawford to have a great victory. How do you train for Terence Crawford? How do you train for Terence Crawford? Do you bring in southpaws? Do you bring in orthodox boxers? Because he can do both. So you might train for an orthodox Terence Crawford and he might just start off southpaw. He introduces variables and complexities that any elite fighter is going to struggle with. And if you train for a particular style, but then Terence Crawford makes the adaptations, that in itself would be difficult for any fighter, regardless of the boxing intelligence. And of course, Canelo has high boxing intelligence, but some might say that Terence Crawford has the highest boxing intelligence. I guess many would be like, it's him and Usyk at the top. And then another element that's important to this puzzle is Crawford's trainer, Bomac. They have an exceptional relationship, an exceptional professional relationship, and Bomac has been able to bring out the best in Crawford. And if Crawford is able to do the weight well, is able to bring what he brought against Spence, then who can live with him? Who can live with that speed? Who can live with that precision? Who can live with those adaptations? Because fighting fighters like Kell Brook, fighting fighters like Sean Porter, fighting fighters, that have that speed, when you then fight fighters that are heavier, those punches are gonna feel like slow motion in comparison. So it's hard to hit Crawford anyway. But it's going to be even harder for a heavier fighter to hit Crawford with an accurate punch. And if everything is on, potentially Crawford could have a sensational performance. There is a variable here, though. Let's quickly talk about that. I did a little bit of research and I noticed that there was a reported health issue, and that health issue delayed his last fight. Now, assuming that he has no injuries and his health is fine, then Crawford has, like I said, he has a chance against anyone. This is what I think would create a sensational, victorious performance. No health issues. The weight that he adds on increases his punch resistance. So the left hooks to the bodies, the overhand rights, they don't have the detrimental effect that one would expect. And with the possibly the highest boxing intelligence and also the premise that extra weight, extra power, no compromising speed or not much of a compromising speed, if that Crawford comes to the ring, then potentially that Crawford could destroy absolutely anyone. Deontay Wilder, is he still dangerous or is he finished? Now, Deontay Wilder was once the most feared puncher in heavyweight boxing. With knockout power that could end a fight in seconds, he built a reputation, a genuine reputation as the Bronze Bomber. But after tough losses and questions about his future, many wonder if his best days are behind him. So is Deontay Wilder still a dangerous contender, or is he finished at the top level? You know what, this Deontay Wilder thing is quite interesting because I was thinking to myself, I was pondering this question. When did Deontay Wilder look good? When did he look good? And I gave 3 reference points. I would say he looked great against the knockout of Audley Harrison. Now, I know a lot of people are going to criticize Audley Harrison, but at the end of the day, Audley Harrison was touted to be a great contender. Some people touted him to be a champion, and, you know, Deontay Wilder did the absolute business. Also, the Luis Ortiz fights. Luis Ortiz was a very credible fighter. He was at one time a feared fighter, and Deontay Wilder got the job done. And then you had the title victory. You had the title victory against Stiverne. Tough fight, real tough fight. Stiverne took some real hard punches and came back. But then you had the rematch with Stiverne, which was an emphatic knockout. So we can take a lot from that. That's when Deontay Wilder looked good. And my other question was, what was Deontay Wilder's boxing identity? And in a simple sense, he had his jab was like a measuring jab. He would put it out there. Sometimes he would snap it, but he would put it out there. And he had he had this 1-2, but he didn't throw it like there. He would throw it like here. So he would think of it like this. Most people throw a jab, they'll throw it like, say, to an opponent's left eye, and then throw the right hand to the opponent's right eye. But he would throw it, say, to the right eye, so it's the trajection is here. So instead of the trajection being there, the trajection is here. And he's throwing the right hand through the target. There's some important points here. The 1-2 is phenomenally hard. It's phenomenally quick. And it's punching through the target. And he's supposed to be like one of the hardest punchers ever. So it's how quickly he throws that 1-2 and how he generates power in that small movement that made him really phenomenal and really just got some really great knockouts. Also, part of his style was that when he would hurt an opponent, he would go from throwing straight, then he would just load up with big hooks. Now, most people would say that this is a mistake, but if you think about it, when an opponent is hurt, if you're punching them around the head and to the temple with hard booming shots, it's very hard, even for an elite fighter who's hurt, to be able to throw counters. They'll have the boxing IQ to be able to think, okay, can I throw a counter in this position? But if your legs are up and under, or if your legs are not under you, throwing temple shots with big booming overhand lefts and rights can actually be effective. And he was effective with that strategy. So to me, an effective Deontay Wilder is utilizing his jab, has a high jab output, and has that quick jab straight right. It's very quick, it's very hard. And let's remember, when we talk about like who is the greatest puncher of all time, two names come up. The general boxing public say George Foreman. However, certain purists will contend that Ernie Shavers hit harder than George Foreman. Now, the credibility to the George Foreman claim is that Evander Holyfield, who fought massive punchers, Riddick Bowe was a huge puncher, Lennox Lewis was a huge puncher, Mike Tyson obviously was a huge puncher. He fought George Foreman, and he said that George Foreman hit him harder than anyone else. So that means he hit harder than Tyson, he hit harder than Riddick Bowe, he hit harder than Lennox Lewis, etc. That's an amazing claim. And also, I think what he said was that he got hit with a left uppercut by George Foreman in round 2 of their fight, which was a great fight, by the way. And he thought he punched his teeth out. He thought his teeth fell out. So clearly, George Foreman has phenomenal power. And if you want to reference that Joe Frazier fight, he hits him with like a left hook and a right hook, and it like lifts him off into the air, respectively. So he clearly has phenomenal power. But this Ernie Shavers, certain people have said that Ernie Shavers' punching was out of this world. So these are the two people that people put up there. Obviously, general fans will say Mike Tyson, and Mike Tyson was a phenomenal puncher. But people in the know will either go to George Foreman and Ernie Shavers. Of course, there's other hard punchers. You got your Mike Tysons, Rocky Marciano with the Suzy Q with the ferocious right hand. Riddick Bowe was a ferocious puncher as well. Tommy Morrison with an amazing left hook. He really generated some crazy power with that left hook. David Tua. There's loads of great punchers in the heavyweight division. But people at the peak of Deontay Wilder's rise, people were actually saying that he is the hardest puncher. Now, it's nearly impossible to qualify this statement. But the point was that he, at the time, was considered the hardest puncher in the division. And he had this 1-2 that was devastating. So it's clearly the demise of Deontay Wilder. When did it start? Well, he fought Tyson Fury. The first fight, a lot of people thought he lost. And then the second fight, respectively, Tyson Fury came in, and Tyson Fury just went to an elite level, and he clearly dominated that fight. And that's when he switched trainer. I think it was Mark Breland that was training him, and I think Mark Breland did a great job. But then he went to Malik Scott, and I'm not going to, a lot of people talk badly about Malik Scott, but if you look at that third fight against Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder actually did some good things. He had a good double jab, straight right. He used the jab to the body to set up the right hand. So he was more technical in that fight. And I thought that if you look at the second fight performance to the third fight performance, even though they were both losses, they were different types of losses. And it felt to me that Malik Scott was definitely bringing something new to the table. And, Deontay Wilder could take a lot from that fight. And obviously, there's some variables here. Was Tyson Fury better in the second fight than he was in the third fight? And was that the significant factor? Or was it just a case of Deontay Wilder had actually improved under the tutelage of Malik Scott? Now, then we had Deontay Wilder versus Helenius. And Helenius is a good boxer. And he scored a first-round knockout. No surprises there. Well, surprising that he did that to Helenius, but not as surprising Deontay Wilder getting a knockout. But what was a surprise was that he did it with a counter right hand. So it would appear that Malik Scott was adding different features to Deontay Wilder, and that was a good thing. But then he fought Joseph Parker, and Joseph Parker came in with a very good strategy. He has Andy Lee. Andy Lee was trained by Emmanuel Stewart, arguably the greatest boxing trainer of all time. So they had a good strategy and they implemented it to a T. And Joseph Parker is a fast, hard puncher that has good boxing IQ. Now, what was I think the negatives from that fight is how Deontay Wilder lost. He didn't get knocked out. It went to decision, but he just practically lost every round and he didn't make the necessary adjustments. He didn't make any adjustments, really. There was a bit of a surge in round 12, but clearly Deontay Wilder needed to make adjustments and he didn't make those adjustments. And that was a huge red flag. In boxing, you must make adjustments. Usyk is such a great fighter, and part of him being a great fighter is making adjustments. Okay. And then he fought Zhilei Zhang, and there was all the publicity that, he's going back to knocking people out and punching hard. And then he had, again, it was Zhilei Zhang just walked him down and knocked him out. And again, Deontay Wilder did not make adjustments. He didn't make the necessary adjustments to make it a competitive fight, if my memory serves me correctly. And it just seemed he would feint a lot and he was looking for the opportunities and it was like he was focused and in the moment, but he just wasn't really punching that much. So there was an issue with the punching output. There was an issue with not using enough jabs. His movement was good, but of course you got to give Zhilei Zhang credit. He's a clever southpaw counterpuncher who's really big and bold, but you would have thought that the lack of speed that Zhang has, that they could have exploited that. You'd have thought that fast 1-2 could have really made a significant impact, and you would have thought that, even there's a bit of creativity like feinting with the right, because that's what they would be looking for, and then throwing that hard left hook or maybe doubling up that left hook and then shooting the 1-2. You would have expected a level of punch creativity and it simply wasn't there. And then he parted ways with Malik Scott, and then he's now got a new trainer. And I did briefly watch his last fight, and I feel that on one hand, you have to give Deontay Wilder a little bit of leeway to kind of develop his confidence, but I wouldn't say that was a good performance. So the question would be, can Deontay Wilder get back on top, and what would he need to do to get back on top? I think he needs to reassert the dominance of the jab. He needs to have a higher output with the jab. He needs to develop his punch creativity. He needs to get back to throwing that fast 1-2. He really needs to get back to that. He also needs to get more creative, I think, with the left hook. Maybe shoot the left hook to the body, maybe for a straight right to the head, left hook to the body. Just introduce some punch creativity. And he also needs to learn how to adapt to situations. And the only way you're going to learn that is in the training camps. So there needs to be we don't know, only the people close to him know whether his skills have completely diminished. Only the people close to him know that. But even if they haven't diminished, he needs to get the right guidance to be able to develop certain parts of his arsenal, because it feels to me that he became a world champion and he, like I said, he had some really good attributes, but recently, there's just been a total absence, and I think his confidence needs to be developed. He needs to redevelop his confidence, but also there needs to be some increase in boxing intelligence and punch creativity. And I think if he was to do that, and if he still has that material, still has that power, still has that speed, then perhaps there's an argument that Deontay Wilder could get back into the races. But I think his confidence is understandably quite low after suffering those two significant defeats. And I think for him to get back, he needs to redevelop the confidence, and he needs to he needs to have the right trainer that was able to build the confidence, build the technique, and add the necessary things that need to be added. And then, assuming he still has that base and he still has that speed and that power, then potentially Deontay Wilder could become a force again. So Deontay Wilder and Francis Ngannou could be next. But does Francis Ngannou have a chance? Is this a good fight for Deontay Wilder? Or is this a risk? Is this a risk that could seriously backfire? Both have power, but who would likely succeed? Who's more likely to get knocked out? That's assuming that the fight ends in a knockout. But I think the first thing to ascertain here, there's a few things to ascertain. One, how much has Deontay Wilder got left, which we spoke about. And the next question to me would be, is Ngannou a good boxer? We got some reference points here. We got Tyson Fury and we got Anthony Joshua. So is Ngannou a good boxer? We got some reference points, Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. The reference point for Tyson Fury, let's look at that first. So in that fight, he was calm. He had some good jabs. He had a really good left-hand counter. His left hand was quite low and his right hand placement was high. There was a lot of feints. I remember him trying a double jab. Right hook, left hook. It completely missed, but, he had some good punch creativity there. And if you look at one of the significant things in that fight, to me, was the knockdown, which was in round 3, where Tyson Fury, I think, throws a left hook straight right, and then he throws a jab straight right. And then Ngannou catches the jab straight right, and then throws a left hook counter. And this left hook counter knocks Tyson Fury down. Now, Deontay Wilder has a very good 1-2. And the question, I guess, would be, if Deontay Wilder throws a 1-2 like that, would Ngannou be able to execute in the same manner? Because a 1-2 from Tyson Fury, power-wise, is different than a 1-2 from Deontay Wilder. But I think in that fight, Ngannou showed that he has a good level of understanding with regards to boxing, that he has a passion with regards to boxing, and the transition from MMA to boxing isn't that spectacular, because Ngannou, from my understanding, within the MMA context, within the MMA universe, has got good hands. He's a good puncher. So he's a good, or perhaps a great striker, because in the MMA they use the striking terminology. He is a great striker within UFC. So when you're making that transition from UFC to boxing, if you're a great striker, there's not that much of a transition to make, or the transition is slightly different. Ngannou showed to me good boxing intelligence against Tyson Fury. He was competitive in that fight. Some people thought he won that fight. Here's another question. Was Tyson Fury in good condition? Was he physically in good condition, but not in good boxing condition? I guess we'll never know. Tyson Fury seemed, he definitely seemed like he was feeling those punches. The knockdown would suggest that, but also his facial expressions would suggest that, yeah, he definitely respected Ngannou's power, and he kind of seen his way through the fight in terms of just, when I remember the fight, I felt like Tyson Fury used his boxing IQ to just take the rounds and to try and limit the punching windows that Ngannou had, because clearly Ngannou is a puncher. Now, Ngannou was promoted as a puncher, but being a puncher in UFC, well, here's the question. Is being a puncher in UFC the same as being a puncher in the boxer? Is being a puncher in UFC the same as being a heavy puncher in boxing? And I would argue that there's a difference, and that significant difference is the gloves. in UFC, I think you have 8-ounce gloves. In boxing, you have like 16 or 12 ounce. You have bigger gloves in boxing, significantly bigger gloves. There's big paddings in boxing. So what does that mean? It means that you could be a dynamite knockout artist in MMA, but that might not translate into boxing. Because in boxing, to be a big puncher in boxing, you need to be able to punch hard with those big gloves on. So there was always a question mark. Does Ngannou, he's a power puncher in UFC, but is he a power puncher in boxing? I think he answered that question. But then we have the two reference points. We have the Tyson Fury fight, but then we have the Anthony Joshua fight. And what happened there? Actually, Ngannou started well in that fight. He started really well in that fight, but then he switched southpaw. I think that probably indicates a confidence that he had, that he wanted to put on a show. And as we've stated previously, Ben Davidson, Anthony Joshua's trainer, he is a strategist, and they had a plan to implement. When he turned southpaw, they implemented the plan. They found the range for the right hand, and that was the first knockdown. And then I believe he did the same thing in the second round. And then, Anthony Joshua just ended the fight. I mean, Anthony Joshua was vicious that night. It felt like he came out like a Sonny Liston. And when people remember Sonny Liston, they remember the Sonny Liston that fought Muhammad Ali. I'm not talking about that Sonny Liston. I'm talking about the Sonny Liston that was feared, and the Sonny Liston that that was brutal. Anthony Joshua really was on his job that night. It was a different type of Anthony Joshua. Hopefully he can bring that Anthony Joshua back in his next fight. But anyway, so we got those two reference points. Now, with Deontay Wilder, we got various reference points. You got the Deontay Wilder that fought Stiverne the first time and the second time. The first one, he faced a contender that could take his power, but he was able to go through adversity, so he gets the heart check. The second fight, he just obliterates Stiverne. Now, is that because Stiverne wasn't in the shape he should have been? Who knows? But again, there's that reference. Then we got the Tyson Fury reference. You got the first fight, which was relatively competitive. I mean, it looked like Deontay Wilder knocked Tyson Fury out in that last round, which was, to this day, I don't know how Tyson Fury got up. So you could see that phenomenal punch power in the first fight. But then there's a second fight, Tyson Fury dominated. And in the third fight, it was like a shootout. So again, in the first and third fight, you got a Deontay Wilder that's more than capable of knocking out a certain level of opposition and competing on the elite level. But then you got the Joseph Parker fights and you got the Zhilei Zhang fights, and you're just kind of scratching your head thinking, Deontay Wilder is showing that he is unable to adapt when he gets into difficult spots. He was in a difficult spot with Joseph Parker and he simply did not adapt. He needed to make adaptations. He needed to find a way to open the door. He needed to up his output. He needed to be more creative in his punching output, and he just didn't do it. And again, with Zhilei Zhang just kind of hunted him and then knocked him out. He wasn't able to adapt. And I guess the question will be, with Ngannou, is Ngannou good enough? Is Ngannou a good enough fighter to knock out Deontay Wilder? The Deontay Wilder that fought Joseph Parker and the Deontay Wilder that fought Zhilei Zhang, I think Ngannou has a significant chance against that fighter, because that fighter just doesn't seem to have the confidence, doesn't seem to have that that nasty intent to really, go out there and punch with real venom. So and also that fighter seems to have some confidence issues with regards to, why didn't he turn it up against Joseph Parker? Is he concerned with regards to his punch resilience? Why didn't he roll the dice? So Ngannou has shown that he could operate with Tyson Fury. Now the question is, what type of Tyson Fury was it? But he still operated with Tyson Fury, which indicates a level of boxing intelligence. And if he brings that level of boxing intelligence, and if he doesn't go southpaw, then he will have a significant chance. Of course, and not only will he have a significant chance, it's hard to really say where do you rate Deontay Wilder with regards to his punch resilience? He took the big shots from Joseph Parker, but he didn't take them from Zhilei Zhang. But then would anyone be able to take those punches from Zhilei Zhang? He was stopped in the second Tyson Fury fight, and he was stopped in the third fight, but he took a lot of punches in those fights. And you could argue that anyone would have been stopped in those circumstances. But what is a genuine question is how much punch resistance does Deontay Wilder have left? And how will there's a few questions. How will Deontay Wilder deal with the counter left hook and the short left hook from Ngannou? How is he going to deal with that? And if Deontay Wilder can bring back that 1-2 with the power and the speed that he had against Stavern, how will Ngannou deal with that? It's a fight that almost seems to guarantee a knockout. I say that and he'll probably go the distance, but you get a feeling that there's definitely going to be a knockout. And I think it's a fight that can really capture the public imagination. And if Deontay Wilder is able to win that fight, he could launch himself back into the heavyweight scene. Is Moses Ituama boxing's next superstar? Now, Moses Ituama is young, but he's already making waves. He's making waves in the heavyweight division. With explosive power and explosive confidence beyond his years, he's being fast-tracked as boxing's next big thing. Fans and promoters are calling him the future of heavyweight boxing. But is Moses Ituama really destined to become sport's next superstar? Is he really destined? Is the hype legitimate? I would say the early implications is that the hype is more than legitimate. But let's look at Moses Ituama's CV. When I use the term CV, I'm using it in a hyperbolic, metaphoric, creative way. I'm not talking about literally someone's CV. It's amazing that I have to explain that. But when I talk about Moses Ituama's CV, I'm referring to the fights that he's had. So if you look at, let's give an example. If you look at Lennox Lewis's professional CV, you would see things such as undisputed heavyweight champion. So first he was, I think, the WBC champion. He lost it to Oliver McCall. Then he retained the WBC title from Oliver McCall. And then he became the undisputed champion. And then he made a sequence of defenses. That is a very impressive CV. Becoming a British champion is an impressive CV. Becoming a European champion is an impressive CV. Becoming a world title contender is impressive. But then when you become a champion and then you become an undisputed champion and then you develop into a legend, that's like the ultimate CV. But obviously Moses Ituama is at the beginning. He's at the beginning stages of his career. So what does his CV look like? At the moment, I think there's three significant, there are three names on his record that we can speculate on. One of them is McLean. The next one is Mike Bellagone. And then the third one is his most popular fight, which was against Dillian Whyte. So McLean had a very competitive fight against Filip Hrgović. So the question would be, how good is Filip Hrgović? We don't know. There was a point where Filip Hrgović was being touted as a potential champion, but we know that I would say at this point, we would say that Filip Hrgović is a good fighter. He's a good fighter, and McLean had a good performance. Now, did Filip Hrgović underestimate McLean? That's possible. But he did have a good performance. It was a competitive fight, but he lost the fight and he was knocked out. But that to me would indicate that McLean came into the Moses Ituama fight with ambition and with some credibility. And he was absolutely, well, it was just a first round knockout. I think it was a few feints, right hook, overhand left, and that was the end of that. So what does that tell us? It tells us that, Moses has great punching accuracy, great speed, and great power. Then we have the Mike Bellagone, and I was looking through his record, and he only has 2 losses. And clearly, when you look at Mike Bellagone, the way he came into the fight, he clearly came with ambition. Interestingly, in the first round, before he got knocked down, there was a battle of the jabs. And there's an interesting pattern here. McLean was a southpaw and Mike Bellagone was a southpaw as well. And against Mike Bellagone, there was a battle of the jabs. And interestingly, Mike had a very fast jab, but Moses Ituama handled that. He won the battle of the jabs, as you would expect. And then he caught him with a punch. I think it was like a two-phased attack, and that caused the first knockdown. And then I believe the other knockdown was in round 2, where he launched a really beautiful counter shot. And that's another insight that we can make into Moses Ituama. He does phased attack. So he might start off with the jab straight right, and then he'll do the jab and overhand left. The reason why I'm using the right hand for the jab is because Moses Ituama is a southpaw. So he goes through the phases. He just doesn't do a 1-2 and then steps out and admire his work. He goes through the phases. Against Dillian Whyte, he went through 3 phases before he hurt him. So he goes through the phases. He also has a nice step back and counter. So if he steps back and you throw, he'll be in position to deliver a counter shot. So he'll do that half step back, and he's always in position to deliver that counter. So we've got a good jab, phased attacks, a nice step back to open up a potential counter. We've got a good body jab. And another thing I've noticed, a combination that he sometimes throws, is the jab to the body and then the straight left to the head. And he's very quick with that punch. It's very hard to read it because he's feinting, and then he'll throw it. It's hard to read it because of the feints, but also the speed and accuracy of the shot also make it difficult to deal with. Against Dillian Whyte, so against those 2 opponents, they were ambitious opponents that were southpaws. So we can see that he can destroy southpaws. Against Dillian Whyte, he went up against an experienced fighter with a very good left hook, a world-class left hook that can do significant damage. Just watch the Derek Chisora fight as a reference in terms of how significant that damage can be. And look at the Joseph Parker fight as a reference point. So Dillian Whyte not only had a really good left hook, but he's also been in with a wealth of great fighters, or a wealth of really good fighters. He's been in with Joseph Parker, he's been in with Tyson Fury, he's been in with Alexander Povetkin. He's fought at the highest level. And Moses Ituama, respectively, he destroyed Dillian Whyte. Of course, there's context. There was the rumor now that there was a leg injury. But despite all of that, there was also a rumor that Moses Ituama got knocked down. What happened to that rumor? But despite the rumors, what we saw was an absolutely blistering Moses Ituama performance. So the other thing is, when you look at a fighter, is to look at their setup. And Moses Ituama's trainer is Benn Davidson. Now, I know Benn Davidson gets a lot of criticism online, but clearly he's a high credible trainer. And I think what he brings to the table is that he studies his opponents meticulously from what I've gathered. He calls it a scout report. So he studies the positives and negatives of his opponents, and then he develops a strategy around that. So I think Moses Ituama has a very good setup. He has a very strong setup. And like I said, all the implications, when you look at those last 3 performances, you would expect him to win those fights, but the manner in how he won those fights was, if it was a test paper, you'd given out A+ every time. So the implications is that Moses Ituama, if he can take a punch, because we need to know if he can take a punch, if he is able to deal with adversity, and if his boxing intelligence enables him to solve the new puzzles that new opponents will bring him, then he definitely has the materials to be a superstar. He punches with the speed of a middleweight, has great footwork, has tremendous accuracy, and has a composure when he has a fighter hurt. He's meticulous with his punch selection. And all the implications will indicate that he can go very, very, very far. And like I said, if he can take a punch, and so if he has punch resilience to the head and body, and if he has that courage and character that all great champions must have, then he could potentially take over the division. He really could. He's really that good. I can't remember ever being so impressed with a boxer's raw talent. I can't remember being so impressed by a performance. Coming to mind, I remember when Lennox Lewis knocked out Razor Ruddock. That was a sensational performance. So that's a reference point. Another reference point is when he knocked out Golota. That was another sensational performance. But when he knocked out Golota, he was a seasoned fighter. I think he'd already been a champion. But that's a reference point. Clearly, we got the Mike Tyson reference where he was knocking out everyone in a ferocious manner. But all the implications is that Moses Ituama might be that big thing. And I know a lot of people disagree with this. A lot of people want to throw him in with Usyk, but I would like to see him in with a few people. And off the top of my head, I think the Cabell fight is a good fight because Cabell brings a lot to the table. He's got a good CV. He beat Zhilei Zhang, retired Zhilei Zhang, so he would be a good fight. I think Martin Bakole is underrated. If you look at Martin Bakole's, not his performance against Joseph Parker, because there's a variable of having a 24-hour camp, and that is a massive variable. If you look at his performance against Jared Anderson, if Martin Bakole can go back to that performance, then he would give anyone a hard time, and that could be a sensational fight. Clearly, the Joseph Parker fight would be a very good fight. And I think those three fights could, they could, they would be big fights, and they would be potentially massive tests for Moses Ituama. And I think that I feel like he should keep going on that trajectory, keep fighting better fighters. But there's obviously levels. It's like if you've got bosses, you've got Usyk as like the final boss. Some people think he should go straight to the final boss. No, I think he should, start fighting people in the top 10 and then progress to that final boss. So Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn will rematch on November the 15th. The first one was brutal, and it was an absolute classic. Both of these men are warriors, and they bared their souls in the ring that night. But can the rematch match the intensity and the spectacle of the first fight? And who will win? To me, the main issue of this fight is the rehydration clause. And my understanding of the rehydration clause is that Chris Eubank Jr. is not allowed to weigh up to any more than 10 pounds. He's not allowed to go over 10 pounds of the limit that he weighs in the previous day. Conor Benn isn't either, but because Eubank is boiling down to a weight, this has a significant, or will have more of a detrimental impact, or potentially more of a detrimental impact on him. So when he weighs in on the Friday, he can't gain more than 10 pounds, I believe, on the Saturday. That's my understanding. Many people believe that this had an impact on him in the last fight. So let's say if a fight is 100%, when you put in a rehydration clause, this could bring them down to 95%, 90%, 85%, 80%. Who knows? But what we do know is that if you go from 1 to 10, Chris Eubank cannot turn up with a rehydration clause and be at a 10, because he's physically compromised, for want of a better word. And from my understanding, the fight nearly collapsed because there was talks that the Eubank team wanted to take the rehydration clause out of the contract for the rematch. There was also an interview where Chris Eubank Jr. stated that he spent 2 nights in hospital. And to me, anyone who watched the fight can see that the rehydration clause had an impact. and it was a detrimental impact. However, we do need to be fair and acknowledge that Conor Benn was coming up. See, he was coming up 2 weight divisions. So one could play devil's advocate and say, well, if Conor Benn's coming up 2 weight divisions and is compromising that weight, then it's only right that Eubank has to make some form of compromise. But the question is, if the compromises someone's health or compromises their punch resistance, when does that compromise become not only detrimental to someone being 100%, but also detrimental to their safety? And I think that's something that's really significant and really important. So I'm not a big fan of the rehydration clause. I'm not a big fan of the 10-pound rehydration clause. And I think, obviously, I understand why you would negotiate for that if you was Conor Benn, but it does put like a question mark on the fight with regards to rolling the dice with regards to safety. Anyway, with regards to the trainers in this fight, I'm assuming the trainers will be the same. So with Chris Eubank Jr., he'll have Jonathan Banks, and with Conor Benn, he'll have Tony Sims. Both are very high respectable trainers. So I think the significant factors, apart from the rehydration clause, would be strategically, can Eubank be effective with the jab, and can Conor Benn nullify the jab? Can Eubank be effective with the short left hook, and can he utilize the counters? And also, the other question would be, can Conor Benn introduce that right hand into the equation? Because if he can start hitting Chris Eubank Jr., start getting in range and hitting him with his big punches, then obviously his chances of success and his chances of winning the fight, they go up exponentially. I thought Conor Benn did good the last time. I thought he showed good head movement. I thought he showed good maturity, good boxing intelligence. And I think he gave a proficient test to Chris Eubank. And I think that Chris Eubank, I believe, delivered like a ridiculous amount of punches in the last couple of rounds, but no one could have predicted that. That was purely a testament of will. But Conor Benn was, he performed well in that fight, considering that he'd never been on that big stage before and he didn't have that big fight experience. He definitely presented, he's shown himself in good light. And on one hand, you could say, who has the advantage? Well, Eubank won the fight, so naturally you would think he had the advantage, but the rematch, you would feel, would take more out of Chris Eubank Jr. than it would out of Conor Benn. So in theory, even without the rehydration clause, Chris Eubank Jr. is now more battle-worn than what he was before. However, Chris Eubank Jr. has experienced Conor Benn. He's experienced the puzzle. So therefore he has more knowledge in solving the puzzle. But then Conor Benn has more knowledge in solving the Chris Eubank Jr. puzzle. So this is going to potentially be a fascinating contest because they're fighting not only for themselves, but for their fathers' names. There's a lot on the line here. And you can see from the first fight that they valued that. It wasn't just about the money. Clearly, boxing is about money. It's entertainment, and you have a short window to make a lot of money, and they did make a lot of money, but they also bared their hearts and soul in the ring, and that should be respected because they were both warriors. So I guess one of the questions would be, who has learned more from that fight? And it's really hard to say because I would assume that Tony Sims and Jonathan Banks would look at the tapes and would develop a specific strategy based on what their opponents did well and based on what their opponents did not so well. So what's going to be significant in the rematch, I think, is how do they both adapt to the new strategies that they're going to bring? Also, there might be other things in play, such as, I don't know who Chris Eubank Jr.'s nutritionist is, but I think, considering that the rehydration clause is in place and considering that he clearly doesn't like boiling down to that weight, he needs to get the best nutritionist in the business. That is a part of his camp that he cannot neglect. We still don't know why. Well, when he got knocked out against Liam Smith, and Liam Smith can punch, of course, and he caught him with a great succession of punches. But before that fight, Eubank was always known for having extraordinarily great punch resistance. And the only explanation that seems valid, well, there's two explanations. Number one, if you get caught, you get caught, and that's it. But number two, there's another explanation that when Eubank boiled down to get, I can't remember what he got down to, but when he boiled his weight down, he did it in a manner that compromised his punch resistance. And he's going to need to be the best version. If he can only bring 85% to the ring, he needs to be the best 85% that he can possibly be. So that's super important for him, because if he gets that wrong, then that increases the opportunity that Conor Benn could score a spectacular victory. And when I say spectacular victory, I mean a knockout. And if you look at round 3, I believed he hurt Chris Eubank Jr. He hurt Chris Eubank Jr. with, I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it was a straight right and a left hook, and then I think a right hook, but he definitely made a significant impact. And with Conor Benn, he punches through the target and he punches with absolute intensity. So when you look at Eubank, sometimes nowadays Eubank will shorten his punches up, and he might take a bit of edge off the punches so he can punch more. But Conor Benn, he just delivers venom, so to speak, with every single punch. He doesn't take any weight off the punches. He just puts maximum effort into his punches, and those punches are dangerous. And if they do have exchanges, particularly at the beginning rounds or in the early rounds, Chris Eubank could be in some significant danger. I think it's potentially a great fight. I think the only bit I don't like is the rehydration element, but I think we're on par for another great matchup. And if it's a draw, or if Conor Benn gets a victory, it could lead up to a trilogy. If Conor Benn was to win, I would hope that, I'm hoping that whatever happens, whoever wins, I'm hoping it's just a competitive, passionate affair that both can be proud of. Because even though Chris Eubank Jr. won the last one, they both can be proud of that. But I would hate to see either one really just get knocked out and just blitzed in a couple rounds. So hopefully the rehydration clause doesn't affect Eubank too much. And as I've stated, on one hand, you got the rehydration, but on the other hand, you got the 2 weight jumps. Because Conor Benn now has experience of actually doing that jump, he should be now more comfortable in doing that jump. So it's probably less likely to impact his speed, and he'll probably be able to put some extra venom into the punches. So this is a very intriguing matchup. Callum Smith, the undefeated super middleweight you need to know about. So Callum Smith is quickly becoming one of the brightest names in British boxing. Undefeated and already holding major domestic titles, he's building some serious momentum in the super middleweight division. With power and a fearless style, Simpson is catching the attention of fans and promoters alike. This is why Callum Simpson is the undefeated super middleweight you need to know about. And first off, congratulations to Callum Simpson for winning the European title. So congratulations. As I've stated before, in boxing there are levels. Most of us will not even know anyone who's been a British champion, a European champion, let alone a world title contender, world champion. So that in itself is a serious achievement, and he should be very proud of it. I was actually watching the fight, and let's start off with the positives. One of the real positive things about this fight was that, well, it started off negative because Callum Simpson was on the floor within like the first half a minute. But what was good is that not only did he get back up, he hurt his opponent later on in the round. And his opponent was named Zuko. He's a southpaw. So obviously this is a good test, because when you fight southpaws, it's always really tricky because they're throwing punches from legitimately different angles, because the right foot is forward as opposed to the left foot. And you could see that he was struggling a bit to adapt to that. And what I liked about Callum was that when he threw his punches, he was throwing these real vicious hooks. He really did keep his hands up. And I noticed is that when he seems to like to fight close, so he was like quite close to his opponent, like almost the head on the chest, and then he was throwing those vicious hooks, and there was some form of creativity there. I did notice he did a left hook to the body and a left hook to the head. Of course, that was Evander Holyfield's favorite combination, so we always appreciate that. And I remember a straight right to the head and then a left hook to the body, so that was really good. But he faced adversity. He had the first knockdown, and then there was a second knockdown. And in the second knockdown, he was just walking in. Like there wasn't, I'm not saying he wasn't fainting, but clearly there wasn't enough fainting, because as he walked in, the opponent just timed him with a straight left. In fairness, Simpson was quite a low target, but it was just a perfectly timed punch. And these things can happen. And he went down, and again, he got back up, and he became victorious. I believe the knockout, it was a stoppage. It was in round 10. And again, he was getting close. He was letting those hooks go. But what he would do, he would get in close, and then he fired like 1, 2, 3, 4 right uppercuts in succession. And this kind of reminded me of like a younger Chris Eubank Jr., just firing those uppercuts in succession, just kept going. And, he sensed that his opponent was hurt, and he exploded. And the one thing I like about Callum is that you can tell he's just passionate about boxing. He's passionate about giving a performance, and win or lose, it feels like he's going to be in some really good fights. And I feel that he's a passionate fighter. And I think it's important in boxing that obviously every opponent wants to win and go through the rankings, but also creating a spectacle. Boxing is entertainment. It's a sport. So it's important that the audiences are entertained, because they're paying their hard-earned money. If they're not entertained, then they're unlikely to come back and watch you. And you find that fighters that are generally not entertaining in the ring, for them to succeed, they have to be extra entertaining outside of the ring. But Callum definitely brings power. He brings a level of punch creativity. He likes to punch on the inside, which he did an awful lot. And he came up against a southpaw who was courageous, who came to fight, and he overcame adversity. So he clearly has heart and he has passion, and he should be commended for that. In terms of, I guess the question is, what level is Callum? And I think it's quite hard to know what level Callum Simpson is. What we know, he's British title level and European title level, but could he go on to be a world title contender? Again, that's the next step of when you've accomplished the European title. But could he become a champion? I would like to see Callum Simpson up against, I need to see him up against other people to confidently be able to say yay or nay to that question. So for example, if he's fighting an opponent with a really good jab, it would be interesting to see how Callum Simpson would deal with that. Also, I did feel that at points he would get caught with shots. So it feels like they need to, you always need to be working on your defense as a boxer, but you can definitely look at that performance and say, okay, there definitely needs to be some more work with the defense. Also, there needs to be more feinting, so that if the more you feint, the harder it is to time a fighter coming in, because when you're feinting, you don't know when the fighter is going to advance. And if Callum Simpson is going to have that identity of being an inside pressure fighter, or if he's going to be a combination of, yes, use the jab, but then be an in-fighter, he needs to ensure that he doesn't telegraph that motion of going from the outside to the inside. Can't telegraph that motion. I'll give a reference. Evander Holyfield, the third round against Lennox Lewis in the first fight, he throws a double jab, he feints, and then I believe then he throws a left hook, right hook, and then left hook to the body. The point is, the double jab and the feints, that kind of, Lennox Lewis doesn't, he's finding it hard to measure, and then Holyfield could jump him with the left hook, right hook, which then sets up that ruthless body shot, that ruthless left hook to the body. George Foreman was one of the people that said that Evander Holyfield has one of the best left hooks to the body that he's ever tasted. But I think that he probably needs him to develop on his punch innovation, develop on his punch creativity, keep work on his defense, work on the feints so that it's harder for opponents to time. But he can also take a lot from the fact that, he's got a really good right uppercut. He's got some really good passion. And I think he could work more on the body work as well. And also work more on his jab. Now, obviously, it's hard to get your jab off against a southpaw, but he seems quite tall to me. So it seems to me that he needs to develop his jab, because if you want to get on that world level, whether a contender or a champion, you need to have a world-class jab. Clearly, the other popular British fighter at that level is Hamza Shiraz. And at the moment, Hamza Shiraz is, I would say, respectively a little bit above Callum Simpson at the moment because of his progression. But considering that Callum Simpson brings in, because he brings in a lot of interest and he's an exciting fighter, if he keeps winning, then this could be a big fight. At the moment, I would say Shiraz has greater punch creativity and is just more controlled. He uses the feints. He has a better offense. And I would say that his boxing intelligence is slightly higher at this time. But like I said, Callum Simpson, is a European champion, and he should be proud. And there's definitely, I saw it in the comment section that someone said he should really appreciate this moment because most people will never be a European champion. And I think that kind of says it all. He's achieved something that most people in this world will never do. And that's phenomenal. And, down the road, if he's able to keep on winning, then perhaps you can have that great British showdown with Hamza Shiraz. So is Naoya Inoue the best fighter on the planet? Now, Inoue has torn through multiple weight divisions with devastating power and absolutely flawless skill. Nicknamed the Monster, he's knocking out champions and making it look completely effortless. Pound for pound lists can change overnight, but Inoue's dominance has many calling him the very best in the sport today. So the question is Inoue truly the best fighter on the planet? Now, just to preface this, I believe it's Naoya Inoue, so apologies if there's mispronunciation. Now, when we talk about Inoue, one of the first things, or one of the important things to acknowledge, is that Inoue is a bantamweight. Now, why is it important to acknowledge that? It's important to acknowledge that because you could argue that bantamweights don't get the attention. They don't get the media attention of, say, the super middleweight division or the heavyweight division. So Inoue has a very big challenge with regards to breaking through. And it's a very difficult task being a bantamweight and then making that breakthrough in terms of being a superstar. He is a superstar in Japan, however. And when I was looking at his style, when I was looking at Inoue's style, I was thinking, initially I was like, this is like the Japanese Mike Tyson in terms of he's ferocious, he's got speed, he's got power. But then when I looked at the foot movement, I thought, no, that's not the appropriate analogy. I think he's like the Japanese Manny Pacquiao because he's got the foot speed, the power, the accuracy. And Inoue is just ferocious. Inoue is completely ferocious. And the one thing that, he's a 4-division world champion, And he has, in Japan, he is absolutely, from my understanding, he's absolutely revered. And one of the things that I like about Inoue is his punch, his punch innovation, or what you can call either punch creativity or punch innovation. And I've wrote some of his combinations down. One of the combinations I see him throw is that triple left hook. So he's like 1, 2, 3 with the left hook, and he's not dipping with it. He's just throwing it like that. That triple left hook. I believe the other person who does that is like Roy Jones in his prime. So the triple left hook delivered with speed and power. And then we have, and this is quite a typical combination in boxing today, is the straight right to the head and the left hook to the body. And of course, when he's throwing the straight right to the head, this is almost like a deflection shot to land that left hook to the body, because when he's throwing that straight right and you're catching it, it kind of leaves that opening for that devastating left hook body shot. And then we have, he does have a ferocious 1-2, but sometimes he'll throw the 1-2 to set up that left hook to the body. And again, it's like he takes the power, a little bit of power at that 1-2 to set up the opening for that left hook to the body. So this is punch creativity at a significant level. And then I saw this one I really liked. Let me see if I can get this right. It was a double jab, right hook, left hook body, left hook head. Double jab, right hook, left hook body, and left hook head. And again, this is the type of punch innovation that, you know, boxing enthusiasts absolutely love. And it's one thing to do it on the pads, but it's another thing to do it on the under the bright lights. And Inoue does both. He has real good punch creativity, and you can see this. You know, you watch his fights, you watch his highlights, and you will see that punch innovation, which I think is such an important part of being a great fighter, which Inoue clearly is. And one thing that I was pleasantly surprised by was when I looked on the pound for pound list. Typically on the pound for pound list, for the top two, you would have Usyk and Terence Crawford. Now, this is understandable. Usyk has dominated the heavyweight division. You have the beating of Anthony Joshua twice, a former 2-time heavyweight champion, then dethroning Tyson Fury twice, who many see Tyson Fury as a modern day great. And then we have the dethroning of Daniel Dubois, another world champion. So he's clearly been dominant on the heavyweight scene. And he's an elite fighter. And then you have Terence Crawford, again, another elite fighter who, off the top of my head, his performance against Spence was simply phenomenal. Spence is an elite fighter, and respectively, he absolutely destroyed him with superb accuracy, speed, and punch selection. And that was truly an amazing performance. And Bud Crawford is an exceptional fighter. But when I looked at the pound for pound list, certain people had Inoue as number 2. So they had Inoue as second on the pound for pound list. So I'm really glad that this fighter, who's a bantamweight, is getting, at least from the boxing purists, the recognition. And I was watching his fight again. I think it was Raymond Cardones, I believe. And Raymond scored an early knockdown against Inoue, and then Inoue came back, and then he dominated the fight and got the stoppage. Big respect for Raymond on that knockdown. It was brilliant. He caught the shot and he threw a beautiful counter. Clearly they had rehearsed that in the gym, and that move paid dividends, even though ultimately he was beaten convincingly. And this is one of the problems with Inoue's career, is his domination. Let me explain. One of the problems with Inoue's career is his domination, because great fighters mostly have great dancing partners. Let me give you an example. Let's take Ali. What does Ali's career look like if you take away the victory against Sonny Liston? Now, they weren't great fights, but Sonny Liston was a very feared heavyweight champion. What does Ali's career look like if you take away the amazing trilogy with Joe Frazier? What does Ali's career look like if you take away the amazing night against George Foreman? Again, George Foreman was a very feared champion. He'd knocked out Joe Frazier in 2 rounds and knocked out Ken Norton in 2 rounds. when you look at Ali's career, you see he has these various dancing partners and they supplement each other. Let's continue with this. Let's take Evander Holyfield, undisputed cruiserweight champion, undisputed heavyweight champion, 4-time heavyweight champion. But what does Evander Holyfield's career look like if you take away Riddick Bowe? Again, he had the trilogy with Riddick Bowe. The first fight was an incredible fight, fought at like a middleweight pace. And the 10th round is reckoned to be one of the greatest rounds of all time. Truly an amazing trilogy. So again, Evander Holyfield had the dance partner of Riddick Bowe. But what does Evander Holyfield, what does Evander Holyfield's career look like if you take away his 2 fights with Mike Tyson? Mike Tyson, was one of the most, in his prime, Mike Tyson was one of the most feared heavyweights of all time. He was exceptionally feared. He had great speed, great power, and he was delivering absolutely ferocious knockouts. So he was the great dance partner for Evander Holyfield. And in that fight, it was kind of billed like a good versus evil, because all great fights will have some type of narrative. And it was a great fight. And, that propelled Evander Holyfield's career even further. So what does Evander Holyfield's career look like if you take away the trilogy with Riddick Bowe and the 2 fights with Mike Tyson? So the point is that great fighters mostly have great fighters mostly have great dancing partners. Let's go to British level and we take Chris Eubank Jr. And Chris Eubank Jr., when he fought Conor Benn, he found his dancing partner, because both of them came together. They came and delivered. Some might say it wasn't a world level fight in terms of skill, but in terms of passion, brutality, and in terms of putting it on the line, it was a spectacle. It was an absolute spectacle outside the ring, and more importantly, it was a spectacle inside the ring. It was a battle of wills, a battle of passion, a battle of 2 fighters fighting for their names. But Inoue, unfortunately, due to his dominance, has not found that dancing partner. He hasn't found that dance partner that will take him to another level. Now, I was looking at who is out there, and you have potential big fights with Nick Ball, and I believe it's Alan Picasso. So maybe they could potentially be the dance partners. But like I said, he's yet to find it. Another thing, just before I wrap it up, in Japan, this man is an absolute superstar. I saw a stat, I don't know if it's accurate, but you'll get the gist. Apparently 10% of live viewership in Japan watch Inoue when he fights. And apparently Inoue is the most searchable boxer, any boxer in Japan. And he's actually more searchable than most global stars. So clearly in Japan, this man is absolutely massive. And as with most celebrities, he has sponsorship deals and things of that nature. So he's commanding, if you look at it through a British lens, you might think that this person isn't known. If you look at it through an American lens, you might think this person isn't widely known. But if you look at it from a Japanese lens, from that lens, this person is a global superstar. And like I said, Inoue has all the ingredients: speed, power, great footwork, punch innovation. He has heart. But the one thing, the little thing that's missing from his career is that dance partner. And hopefully he'll be able to secure that dance partner that can excel his amazing legacy even further. So how good was Holly Holm? Because before stepping into UFC, Holly Holm was already a decorated world champion in boxing, known for her elite striking and technical mastery. Holly Holm carried that pedigree into MMA, where she produced one of the biggest upsets in history by knocking out Ronda Rousey. But she was a boxing legend before she ever stepped in the MMA cage. So the question remains, how good or how great was Holly Holm as a boxer? It's a good question. And some people rank Holly Holm as a female boxer in terms of the greatest of all time list as number 2. Some people rank her that highly. And clearly she has amazing accomplishments. She was a champion in 3 different divisions. I believe that was light welterweight, welterweight, and light middleweight. And that's a hell of an accomplishment. And also what's interesting is that she lost to someone on the top 10 rankings of the greatest female boxers of all time, which was Anne-Sophie Mathis, and she lost by, I believe it was a brutal knockout. And I think that knockout is on a lot of female boxing highlight reels. But what's not commonly spoke about is that she rematched this person and beat them on a decision, which again, I think is a testament to her character. And also, you know, in a sense, all great boxers, you could argue, have dancing partners. Put it this way, Muhammad Ali, he had a great dancing partner in Joe Frazier. He had another great dancing partner in George Foreman. What happens to Ali's career if you take away Joe Frazier and George Foreman? Does it affect it? Let's take another fighter, Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield had a great dancing partner with Riddick Bowe. 3 absolutely spectacular, brutal fights. And then he had another great dancing partner with Mike Tyson. What happens if you take Mike Tyson and Riddick Bowe off the Evander Holyfield resume? Does it change things? So I guess when you look at Holly Holm's boxing career, one of those dancing partners was Anne-Sophie Mathis. And Anne-Sophie Mathis scored that brutal knockout. And then she came back and beat her on points. So that says a lot about her. It says a lot about that character that she has. It's interesting because when Holly Holm went into UFC, I feel that her boxing credentials were I feel that they weren't presented properly. And this actually serves to 2 perspectives. The first perspective is that at that time, female boxing was just totally under the radar. And by female boxing being under the radar, Holly Holm's greatness in the boxing arena was also under the radar. Because when she fought Ronda Rousey and when she delivered, and just to say that when she fought Ronda Rousey was seen as a machine. She was seen as someone that was destroying competition. And this was seen as an easy fight. And I really wanted Holly Holm to win that fight because obviously she was a former champion and a great champion. And the irony is that not only did she knock her out, but she knocked her out with a leg kick as opposed to a punch. And ironically, or not ironically, Holly Holm actually has a kickboxing background as well as a boxing background. But when she knocked out Ronda Rousey, it's almost like the previous chapters of her book, which was winning multiple world titles and being arguably one of the greatest female boxers of all time. It's almost like that book, those chapters was then opened up to the boxing public or opened up to the general public. And then by having that great achievement, that opened up the pages to the other great achievements that she had. It's kind of like a shame that it kind of happened like that because it felt that when she was fighting as a boxer, she didn't get the recognition she deserved. And a lot of female boxers, they went under the radar, even though they may have had some spectacular achievements. And I think that definitely happened to her career. But the Ronda Rousey fight, I feel that knockout. And remember, the MMA is such a huge platform, and that huge platform not only highlighted what she did to Ronda Rousey, but it also highlighted what she had done in her boxing career. And that's a great thing. So how does she compare to the other greats within the boxing arena? Well, I think there's a few names out there, isn't it? For me, obviously, we've all heard of Clarissa Shields and Katie and Amanda Serrano. But one of my favorite female boxers was the Lucia Riker. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And previously I've said that some fighters suffer from the Lucia Riker problem, and that's the problem where you're so good, you don't have any competition. So it's always hard to qualify how anyone would do against Lucia Riker because she was just above everyone. I even think she had an undefeated kickboxing record. I mean, she was levels above everyone at the time. And I could be wrong here, but I don't think there was any opposition that really pushed her to the point of where she had to get up from a knockdown or deal with some significant adversity. So it's kind of hard to ascertain, where do you place both of them? I mean, like I said, a lot of people place Holly Holm as number 2. Other people would place Lucia Riker as number 2. But how would it have gone if they both fought? The interesting variable here is that Holly Holm is a southpaw, and she has that sneaky straight left, and she has, she's like an upright fighter. She's using the jab, she's using angles, and let's be honest, that would give anyone problems. And I think, had she been in the same era as Lucia Riker, that would have been an unbelievable fight, and that would have been the dancing partner that Lucia Riker would have needed to really show and illustrate her greatness. I actually was looking into why didn't they fight, and when Holly Holm was rising into prominence, Lucia Riker was undefeated and had long retired. But then the other name that came up was Chrissy Martin. Now, for those that don't know, Chrissy Martin she fought when Mike Tyson fought Evander Holyfield in the first fight, she fought on the undercard and she delivered a brutal knockout, and she was knocking everyone out. She was so marketable. Like, to this day, I don't understand how it was contained, particularly when she had that exposure on the Evander Holyfield Mike Tyson fight. I think the culture at the time was kind of against female boxing, because if Chrissy Martin was boxing today in her heyday, she would be a superstar purely based on the way she fights. She was literally like the female Mike Tyson. And when I say the female Mike Tyson, I'm not talking about just delivering knockouts. I wouldn't say she had the head movement, but she had those really vicious hooks. And when she knocked people out, it was significant. And in female boxing, particularly in modern female boxing, I would say that there's less knockouts in modern female boxing. So she was really an anomaly, in the sense of she was really, scoring these blistering knockouts. But how would she have fared against Holly Holmes? I think there's only 2 ways that fight can go. Either A, the most logical way would be that Holly Holmes would win a decision, or the other way, which gives a small percentage, Chrissy Martin scores a brutal knockout. But that would have been a great fight to market as well. That really, I think, would have captured the public imagination. But regardless, and all of this is speculation anyway, but regardless, I'm so glad that Holly Holm is getting that recognition. And she's actually recently signed to MVP, which is Jake Paul. And one thing that is funny, because people criticize Jake Paul for damaging boxing, but the one thing Jake Paul has done, he has brought a different level of attention to female boxing. Let me just give you a brief example. Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul was watched by 60 million viewers. So by default, those 60 million people also watched the Amanda Serrano-Katie Taylor rematch, which was the best fight of the whole show. So they stole the show. So Jake Paul has done so much with regards to bringing attention to female boxing, but also, under his leadership, female boxers, specifically Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor, have been paid handsomely within the millions. So he's definitely brought something positive to female boxing. And Holly Holmes has now signed with Jake Paul. Unfortunately, this is at the tail end of her career, but hopefully she'll be able to secure, based on her popularity, she more than likely might be able to secure some type of mega fight, which, her legacy is already secured, but I guess as a boxer and as a fighter, she will probably yearn for that next challenge. And there definitely could be some great fights down the line. But I think, where does she go on that list? You got to put her in the top 5. I think some people have her as number 1. I can see why some people have her as number 2, but she definitely has such a solid, strong legacy within the boxing context. And I think a lot of us who love boxing were just over the moon. We're absolutely over the moon when she went into MMA and knocked out the fierce Ronda Rousey.